what is restaking, Tomasz?
What is restaking? Restaking is taking the ETH that you have staked on Ethereum from your validator, 32 ETH, right? Like, so for a solo staker, so it'll be 32 ETH per validators. And then somehow using it for securing some other part of the protocol, or it can be an oracle, it can be other layer 2, it can be actually any system that requires a deposit that is somehow slashable, that protects the security of that system. We see protocols proposing the restaking solutions. Eigenlayer is the one that's probably the most well known. And yeah, this is, I think it's that's just this.
So why would somebody want to restake to secure a different protocol?
As for the users, they want to restake to get additional yields. Like someone promises them that you'll get more of yield if you restake your ETH. As for other protocol, why do they want restaking? Is because they may consider it complex to establish a trusted staking solution for their own protocols, a security solution. So say, okay, we have Ethereum with all the Ethereum research and legitimacy, and people are used to all the tooling around staking on Ethereum. So why don't say, I need just that security. I'll use the validators from Ethereum. And operators, they're already very sophisticated. So they very likely, I'm not only borrowing the security, just the staked ETH, but also the quality of the infrastructure teams. So.
All right, so you don't have to effectively bootstrap your own network and figure out a new economic model to kind of have people use the service.
Yes, exactly. So I think it opens a lot of, like the path for many of the startups. Like if you build the startups and you say, okay, I want to launch the protocol, it feels like launching a protocol is a bit less intimidating now, right? So I think it's all about this, like building this composability that's like the new ideas can be deployed much easier without having to hire all this like very, very heavyweight engineers.
Okay, so now that at least I have a good intuition about this, I get to be slightly better at asking the next set of questions. Ethereum ecosystem, of course, has this minimum 32 ETH requirement for you to stake and earn a yield, but we can't expect everybody to have enough money to buy 32 ETH or over time. So there's a lot of strategies people get to pull together and use different services to make that easier. And we kind of see that a lot. You have kind of Rocket Pool, you have Lido, you have a few other protocols out there, and they are massive operations. They represent a big chunk of all staked Ethereum. And that means we have to kind of think about how those ecosystems are evolving as we update the Ethereum protocol itself. So before we jump into those 4 EIPs that we care about, maybe it'd be helpful for you to highlight what are some upcoming challenges that exist in kind of the world of staking? Like what are some upcoming problems that we see or things we would like to see but aren't there yet? Or kind of, I mean, how does MEV come up here now? All the kind of complexities that make the next few years interesting.
I think challenges come from the combination of the fact that it's part of the financial markets, part of the protocol design, part of the innovation space, right? So all of this together says that every month there's something new that's attacking designers of the protocols.
And maybe just to kind of ask, when you kind of think about security of those assets, is that on the financial or economic, or is that a different category to you?
When I think about security of the staked assets, I think that primarily I think about the protocol, like what are the risks to the protocol because something is misdesigned, and maybe obviously like from the perspective of delivering solutions for institutions, I have to think like at the top priority of the securing their assets, right? So also, but this is more of the infrastructure question. So if I think about a protocol, it's designing the protocol security. If thinking about the institutional clients, then designing like the security for their asset. All of this is mixed. Like, so for protocol, the security is risks of centralization, risks of this innovation. Like you see restaking. What if we borrow too much security? If everything starts getting slashed and you have this very complex interconnected system of where exactly your security is, like what's where your stake deposits are really operating, like what are they securing? So it's massive risk. For the protocol, any issues around the more complex sets of smart contracts? You mentioned Lido, you mentioned Rocket Pool. All of the solutions are sets of smart contracts that have to be audited, verified, and kind of go through the different process than the protocol itself. So like if we fail at the protocol, you can assume that there is some core development assessment and you start making changes and you patch it. If you fail when you are independent operator of the set of smart contracts, then there is some
There's a lot of unhappy people.
yeah, that's a bit more of a tension. Yeah. So financial, innovation, financial protocol, innovation. I think all those surprises, like
Any
layer was a surprise. Sorry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Any other long-term challenges that you see? Like maybe how does MEV come into play here in the staking world?
So I think, well, when we look at MEV and many other things, it's about this, are there any centralization risks? And the centralization risks that very often arise from the fact that a single entity can start amassing a lot of capital and just keep reinvesting it into taking more and more of an advantage. So some kind of monopolizing scenarios where, and we see that, like we keep asking, like, so if you really care about whether someone has more than 33% of the stake, then what can lead to this more than 33%? As it's just like, sometimes it's a popularity contest or like more like convenience contest. Like I feel safer when I stake where everyone else stakes. And then as a protocol, we have to remind that actually you should feel a bit less safe when you stake where everyone else stakes. But it's less
Single point of failure situations. Yep.
Yeah. And we're coming back to MEV because MEV gives a lot of like capital as a result of very advanced operations, and it requires a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and a lot of setup. Like the moat is very significant, and barriers of entry for the new entrants to the like market making, block building markets. And there are some risks of vertical integration between all the components of the system. When we talk about proposers, builders, when we think about incentive for the financial markets participants to start operating validators themselves to decrease the latency for accessing the chain.
All right. So now that we have enough context, let's get into the actual stuff we want to talk about. So there's 4 EIPs. I want to understand how they affect the staking ecosystem and landscape. And maybe before I do that, who knows what an EIP is? Okay, so this is great. So I'm just going to start throwing a lot of numbers, and hopefully some of you can remember it. If not, don't worry. We have this on video. So we're going to talk about EIP 7002, EIP 7044, 4788. What's the last one? 7251. There we go, just quizzing you. 7251. So let's start with the first one, EIP 7002. What is it, and why is it important?
7002 is the validator exits that can be initiated from the execution layer. So why is it important?
So maybe tell us what happens now and what does this propose?
What is the state now, right? So when you want to exit from the network as a validator, so like you deposit 32 ETH and you want to say, okay, it's enough. Like for a few months I was staking and I acquired some yield and I want to redeploy that capital somewhere else. I want to exit the validator. The thing is, for any like solo operator or someone who just stakes their own ETH, they will hold the pair of keys, like the keys for the actual validation and the withdrawal credentials. So usually they belong to the same person for a solo staker. But like much of the staking nowadays is separated to the node operators who are efficient in running infrastructure and the capital providers, the ones who are putting capital at risk and are looking for the best operators. And you can imagine that usually what happens is the operator will operate the validator key. Like, so they can act because they need to do that to run the attestations, proposals of the blocks and so on. And it's all happening on the consensus layer, on the consensus layer with the beacon chain, because that's where you do all the signatures that can be verified on beacon chain. And because exiting the validator is initiating some action on the consensus layer, that validator key is required to initiate that action. You have to send the validator exit, sign it with the validator key, and then the deposit is exited back, so withdrawn to the address that is set up by the.
So I'm going to try to repeat this live and see if I understand it correctly. So if I have 32 ETH, I say I want to stake it. I get a withdrawal key and a validator key. So I have now these two keys. I give the validator key to a staking service and also my 32 ETH. And then now, currently, if I want to now exit and get my 32 ETH back plus whatever 5-6% yield, I have to tell the validator that I want to exit. Then the validator has to tell the consensus layer that I want to exit.
Yes.
And then I have to give my withdrawal key again to the validator.
Yeah, so the thing is, I have to ask someone, oh, we would like to withdraw it. And it means that the operator, if we are a separate entity, can keep me a bit like as I...
So they can just say, well, we'll get to it soon.
No, or they may lose those keys, or less likely, but it happened in the past. But they simply will keep our assets. And this doesn't feel anymore like it's non-custodial. And non-custodial is extremely important in the from the perspective of regulatory and legal aspect. Like so the node operator wants to just operate infra and go to the taxman regulator and say, like, we don't touch the client's assets. Like, we cannot really do anything with those assets. But there's this like one thing that they actually can just keep them, and then the client loses access. Like, cannot just force you.
That's not good.
Not good at all. And this is the initial design of Ethereum. What happens, like, so nowadays the thing that happens is that you can actually the arrangements between the node operator and the capital provider are that the capital provider, the staker, will ask for the pre-signed withdrawals, like the exit. Sorry, not the withdrawals, but the validator exits. So the node operator will use their validator keys and prepare the messages that you can broadcast at any time and share them with you and say, like, here are the messages. When you broadcast them, then you can exit.
So that's just like a hacky solution.
Yeah, it's very manual. And
okay. So how does 7002 fix this?
Yes, 7002 allows you to actually use your withdrawal credentials. So your address to which you will withdraw the exit the validator assets, withdraw the assets, use it for signing a message to be delivered to the consensus to beacon chain, and that will initiate the exit. So like you are in full control. You can just decide when to exit.
So that sounds like a pretty good win, and it's a simple enough of an intuition. So that's great. Let's move on to the second EIP.
But there's I think there's one thing that is very important about 7002. Like it's I mean, that's why I think that we should talk more about those EIPs, because I think there will be so many startups launched on top of those few EIPs. Because when you can start exiting validators, you can start preparing some tooling that will allow people to programmatically decide when to exit the validator. So you can deploy the smart contracts that will say, oh, maybe I could keep observing the consensus client behavior, maybe
any risky situation,
whatever reasons, like conditions, I decide to exit when this happens, like that anyone can invoke it. So someone can manage for you the exits whenever some conditions happens. And the other thing which is super important is in the restaking world, at the moment, if you're slashed, then the idea is that only after you will exit yourself, somehow your assets will be assigned to the protocol that you were protecting, right? Like you were slashed, but that it's a bit like a delayed slashing. Like with the restaking, you're punished, but well, if you leave the assets forever on Ethereum, they will keep just amassing the yield. But now the solutions around restaking can automatically, during the slashing, also
give it back,
force you to exit the validator.
Oh, amazing. Okay, should we go to the next one?
Sure.
7044. What is it and why does it matter?
This one is much simpler, actually. So now when we explained all of this, 7044 is an easy one. So this one comes in the upcoming fork, and what it will have is that message that we said that is nowadays arranged between the operator and the staker, that pre-signed validator exit. At the moment, it's protected because in the past we were aware as a core development team that during some very contentious, like large forks, social forks on the network, you wouldn't like to somehow reuse those messages on both forks. So there was a design to prevent messages from more than 2 forks in the past to be activated in the future. So they kind of like had expiry time. And well, if you enter into this arrangement between the node operator and the staker, and somehow the relationship breaks for whatever reason, then you don't want that message to expire. So 7044 just fixes this and says like, oh, they don't expire anymore. When you sign them, then they will be always valid.
Okay, so that's a simple one, because then after 7044, you get to make 7002 even better.
Yes, so 7002 really fixes it properly. 7044 is like just a short-term fix that we can use for the current state.
Awesome. Should we move on to the third one?
Yeah, sure.
4788.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest one for creating startups, I think.
I guess hopefully people are listening.
Yeah. I hope that people will be hacking around it. 4788 gives the access to the Beacon chain block root from the execution layer. And what does it mean? Like, I think nowadays the staking is not very programmable. Like, so we used to the Ethereum that you have state and you can read everything about the chain and do so much because you start composing smart contracts and invoking things and build liquidations, DeFi, and people are very creative. Like, and then you have this massive amount of data on the consensus side on the Beacon chain that you cannot just automatically grab and use for the conditions building of something happening. And even with all of this, we see lots of successful DeFi startups that somehow relate to that information, but use that information like with oracles or some other ways. And here, what we do is we take the data from the Beacon chain, the block root, from which we can extract any information about like was the validator slashed, what's the current effective balance of that validator, what is the number of validators, and so on and so on. Like, so whatever you could imagine. And for example, what are the rewards in the last 7 days or last month? Now, if you can introduce that to the DeFi side of the execution,
so now it's just accessible with smart contracts.
Yes, so you can for example create some kind of yield products that are automating the create wrapped version where you split the different types of rewards, and you say like, oh, maybe I'll be redirecting the normal rewards, block rewards to one player, MEV to another player. MEV is a separate part, and and maybe like the things related to the number of validators and attestations to someone else, and you can have like this fixed for float exchange, and you can also do things related to restaking once again, because if you're restaking but you don't know really at what stage is the validator, is it already slashed? But you think like, oh, everything's fine.
Just avoid a lot of bad scenarios.
There's no security there. Also for the liquid staking, I think for things like Lido, tracking if operators are already exiting, if they follow the requirements.
That sounds like a massive opportunity, because now you get to offer these as primitives and effectively create an even more efficient market.
Yeah, and it plays well also with 7002. Like, so those two together give you like the full control, connectivity between
say one button exit
and execution
with a handful of conditions. Okay, last one, 7251.
Max effective balance. So the increased max effective balance means that at the moment you have this 32 ETH, which is like the activation balance, but also max effective balance. So like to get the first validator key, you have to deposit 32 ETH. But also above 32 ETH, you start withdrawals if you set up the withdrawals. Like, so you never amass automatically beyond that. And why max effective balance is being introduced? So initially my reaction was like, oh, why? Like we want to use it technically because
This is maybe to understand. So you're saying max effective balance is saying that right now minimum and maximum is 32 ETH.
Max effective balance changes the maximum to 2048, I think, is the proposal. But you can imagine like maybe nothing, like whatever.
But the minimum is still 32.
Beyond. Yes. So
okay.
Activation is still 32 ETH, which means that you still need 32 ETH for the validator to be operational. But you can limit the number of keys that are needed for operating larger amounts. So theoretically, it targets the larger operators. Like it's usually solo staker. Most of the solo stakers probably don't have 2048 ETH. So it means like, okay, if I'm a large operator, I can limit the number of keys. It's very important for the network because we don't have to share that many messages. Like there's much less burden on the network to exchange to track all the validator keys, attestations, aggregations, and so on. Very much desired. With this change, we aggregate that. It's easier to manage the keys for institutional players, but also it is very important for solo stakers. They can start gaining the value from any amount above 32 ETH without necessarily amassing another 32 ETH. Like so.
I see. So it just creates the pool a lot more, just makes it bigger and more efficient without creating all the multiple smaller ones to coordinate.
Exactly. For the large players, it's easier to compound. For the small players nowadays, it's very hard to compound because you practically need to get 100% over time to get the next validator. But now you practically can compound immediately. You can leave the balance. You can move the balance and say, I don't want to withdraw. I want to keep staking again. Well, we cannot reuse the word restaking because it got that either meaning.
I mean, it sounds like to me that all of these are companies here.
Once again?
All of these are companies now. You can totally
yes.
create an incentive around offering this. Interestingly, okay. Well, last question before we end this. We can learn about all these EIPs. What is the actual status and timelines for them to become real?
So the 7044 goes in now. 4788 goes live very soon. And
is it part of the same next upgrade, or is it?
Yeah,
Dencun?
in the Dencun. Yeah. So you can expect it in Q1 next year, most likely. And
We've heard that before.
yeah, each time. And the 7251 is a bit longer wait. However, not necessarily, because it's not that complicated. So maybe if we start working on it, maybe it will also make it not to this one, but to the next fork. In 7002, also something that we'll wait for, but very likely in the fork after Dencun.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that amazing conversation, and hopefully you all know what's changing in the world of staking ETH. Please give him a round of applause.